Hello, everyone. We're going to get started in a couple minutes here. Thank you all for joining. Just want to give everyone just a chance to log in. All right. So with that, we're going to get started. So as I said, thank you all for joining. This is in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month. Latinas in Tech Chicago and 1871 have partnered up together to present Empresarias Leading in Tech. So a little bit about Latinas in Tech. We are a nonprofit organization that is dedicated to helping Latinas across the country and across the world now with professional development, recruiting opportunities, and mentorship. And so a little bit more about Latinas in Tech. We have 20 chapters that are worldwide now, over 15,000 members, over 27 nationalities, and over 200 partner companies with Latinas in Tech. In Chicago alone, we have over 500 members in our Facebook group. And to introduce our Chicago team, my name is Andrea Minjas. I am a software engineer at Beyond Finance. Yvonne Gonzalez, who is helping me behind the scenes today. She is a communications and public relations professional, and Carla Jacobson, who is the Director of Customer Success at Dronera. And I would like to introduce today's speakers. So we have Paula Cintes Dera. She's the co-founder and CEO of Wave. I hope I said that right. And Luisa Castellanos, the co-founder and CEO of Science Tech Support. And so if I could kick it off to either one of you who would like to start, if you could just introduce yourselves a little bit and tell us a little bit about your organization and your industry.
Yeah, I can go first. So I'm Luisa Castellanos, co-founder and COO of Science on Call. That's like if you're trying to find us on the internet, you can search Science on Call. We started in June of 2020. And before that, we had actually run a business called Science Retail, which was an IT consulting company. And so out of that, we had started working with a lot of restaurants. And now we work exclusively with restaurants. We are the tech support for restaurants. And we've grown to support over 150 locations across 40 brands, and we're growing pretty quickly. And a lot of that stemmed from being in Accelerator programs, being in 1871, and really working off of the network that we have in Chicago, but right now we're currently in St. Paul, Minnesota. So we have a network there as well.
And I'll go next. Hi, everybody. I'm Paula Cintas. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wave. I am also a mom of 3 very active little boys. I was born and raised in Bogota, Colombia. And then I came here when I was 18 for college, and then found my way into the executive search and recruiting world, which has really kind of set the tone for a lot of what I'm doing today. I founded Wave in 2019 with a coworker of mine who's an expert in kind of assessment models. And Wave is really a talent marketplace and a community that really brings together companies and diverse individual, women and minorities into one central place. And then we also look at people through a more holistic lens. And then we celebrate all types of diversity. So it's not just focusing on experience. We think that that's very important, but there's other data points. And we emphasize skills, life experiences, and drivers of every person to create more authentic matches with companies.
That's great. So interesting. So Luisa, maybe if we can kick it back to you, and then we'll go back and forth. We'll go back and forth between the both of you. Luisa, what made you want to start Science on Call? And I know that you have a couple partners that run Science on Call with you.
Yeah, so I actually started my first company when I was 11. So I was really into sewing, and I started making my own little stuffed animals, and I sold them in all different toy stores, art galleries all across the country, several Whole Foods locations. And so I did that up until about high school. And in high school, you know, there's a lot of great classes about, you know, math and science and all that stuff. But what I really wanted to do was be an entrepreneur. And so in college, I studied entrepreneurship and marketing. And after graduating college, I met my co-founder, Andy. I had actually known him through the art community. His wife was an artist. And so I knew of him, and he was leaving his job at Intelligentsia. He was the IT director of Intelligentsia, and asked if I would join him as a co-founder in our first company, Science Retail. And so I was so excited to be able to work with small businesses at the time, because I too had my own small business. I loved all the unique coffee shops and record stores and shoe stores, and I wanted to support all of them. I didn't want to just work for one small business. I wanted to work for all of them. And so that was the perfect fit for me at the time. And as we grew, we started to recognize that restaurants really needed tech support, that there was a increasingly complicated tech stack in the restaurant industry and continues to grow. And so with the addition of our CTO, Ken Sang, he has helped us to really productize what we do. So we've really built more of a platform behind how we can support restaurants all across the country remotely with just a click of a button.
Wow, it's so fascinating. I thought that you were more local. It's really interesting to know that you're all across the country.
Yeah, we actually just signed our first East Coast customer. So we're coast to coast now, officially.
Wow, super exciting. Yeah. And then Paula, how about you?
Yeah, so I took a little bit of a different, approach. I spent about 15 years in the recruiting industry and executive search and recruiting, in a corporate role, both on kind of the client side, but then I also worked internally and had a range of kind of operations and kind of technology and innovation roles, and was exposed to that entire process. And I pieced all those things together in this personal kind of interest in D&I, and decided to kind of take a big leap and become an entrepreneur. So it's been, a little bit of a journey for me. We really kind of founded Wave, as a catalyst, and really as a way to challenge and change the way recruiting is done, because we saw so many opportunities in terms of the process and the approach that's been taken historically. There's a lot of disruption happening in HR, but at the same time, when you look at it underneath the hood, the way that people are actually being identified and the way that they're being assessed, or selected for jobs, is still very old school, very traditional. So we're trying to take a different approach and lens to do that.
Yeah, and that's so important, especially as we try to get more diversity into spaces like tech.
Correct.
And Luisa, back to you. Could you tell us about your experience? And I know both of you have actually gone through a couple programs at 1871. Could you tell us specifically about your experience with the Latinx Incubator program? How do you feel that it helped grow your business? Was there anything more technical, or even just like things that you don't think of, such as like business license or taxes, that it really helped you with?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually was familiar with 1871 during my time at DePaul. We actually got to visit the space right around when they opened, which I think was like 2010 maybe. And so I was familiar with the kind of startup ecosystem prior to starting Science Retail, but Science Retail was purely a consulting company. Like, we weren't a tech company at the time. We supported technology, but we weren't a tech startup. And so when we entered into the Food Foundry Accelerator program, which is run out of RelishWorks, which is the innovation hub for Gordon Food Service, that's when we started to really pivot towards a subscription-based service that is tech-enabled and can actually be more of a startup that's VC fundable, that can be productized. And so that was where our journey started. And actually, RelishWorks in 1871 have a really great partnership. So through the Food Foundry program, we were able to participate in the Pyros program alongside the Food Foundry. And the balance was really perfect because Food Foundry was very restaurant focused. We had a small group of founders that we worked very closely with. And then Pyros was much more broad network of founders from all different stages. And so with Pyros, we were placed into, I believe, the build stage, which we were very much early stage at the time. We had no idea how to run a startup. We had no idea who our customers were, how we were going to grow, how we were going to fundraise. All, like, we were starting from scratch. And so that program was very fitted towards our stage. And so we really learned the ins and outs of product market fit, how to build an MVP. There were so many other founders in the same position as us. And so that was probably the best part of it, was that we weren't alone, and we knew that we could ask any question and somebody has probably had the same issue. And I continue to use other founders as a resource. So I was part of the Latinx program at 1871, just following Food Foundry. I just loved the startup community. I wanted to continue learning and being a part of the community. So I joined Latinx and Wisdom at the same time, which was a little hectic as we were scaling our business at the very same time. Summer 2020 was a huge summer for us. And for me personally, developmentally, becoming more of a startup founder, getting to know other startup founders who were similar to me in their journey. I had never really had other women founders to connect with. And anyone out there who is a founder, you probably feel the same way when you talk to your friends or your family about what you do. They're like, they don't get it. It's like, is it a job? Who's your boss? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing this? You're crazy. So it was really, really great to have others who were taking that same sacrifice and being able to help with every stage of development in our business and personally.
That's great. That's awesome. And then Paula, how about you?
Yeah, well, 1871 has been wonderful for us for, it was kind of interesting. We started going down the entrepreneurship path. And as I mentioned, as first-time entrepreneurs, we're trying to navigate it. And you think in your head, you're like, I can do this, like, no problem, what's there to it? But as you start getting deep into it, you're really A to Z. You are everything in that organization. And there are so many pieces. And there's so many things that you don't even know about, from thinking about marketing and sales and product and, and even running the business day to day, your financing, it's accounting, legal. So there are so many different aspects and areas to starting a company that having, 1871 has been phenomenal. We try to do it on our own, partially because I wasn't quite sure early on, like, where I would fit within the 1871 ecosystem. And finally, someone said, you just need to go talk to them. Like, this might be a great resource for you. And it really has been. I've been part of both the Pyros program, which is more kind of structured, and they've they kind of put you depending on the stage of the business that you're in, whether you just have an idea or you already have more of a product or you're actually launching. And I've also been part of a couple of like the other groups, such as WISDOM, which is focused on women. And then now I'm part of the Latinx kind of cohort as well. The other component to this, outside of, I think, just the community, which is fantastic, and being, like Lisa said, like being connected to other founders and people that are dealing with the same challenges and questions and the ups and downs. It's a roller coaster, and it can even be a roller coaster within a day. I might have like the most amazing call where, we just onboarded a new client or something, and then, an hour later, something else is, at the top of mind and you forgot about that. So it's great to be connected to other people that are going through this same experience and dealing with the same challenges. And then it's also great to have the network, the mentors that are part of the 1871 kind of ecosystem are phenomenal. Anytime that we are thinking about, we should be thinking about copywriting or anything that isn't kind of our wheelhouse, there's a mentor, and we reach out to them, and they're so open and happy to provide their input and feedback. And it's just, it's a great way of empowering and enabling entrepreneurs like us.
Yeah, I'll also add to the idea of when you start a business, you are doing everything. I was not an accountant. I wasn't a finance person. I wasn't a salesperson. And, I had my college experience, but that's like a class that you have nothing to really compare to. When you're in the business, you have to figure it out. You have no choice. And so having people to work with, and co-founders too, there's no way I could have done this without co-founders. And now that we have more of a team, I don't have to do all the marketing and all the finance anymore, which is great, but you still need that structure in place before you hire. You need to know what those needs are, because you won't be able to find the right person. And at the beginning, that person, for the first few hires, are also going to have to really know how to do everything and figure out where their role will be over time, because it's not a regular job. So I would add that when you're hiring, making sure that the people you hire understand that this is a startup and it's not a job, it's an opportunity. That's the biggest thing I've learned in like the last year, probably.
Yeah, absolutely. 1 second. I think I might have skipped a slide here. Community is definitely super important, especially when it comes to being a founder. So with that, and both of you have had really great experiences through the programs at 1871. What are some of the financial considerations that for anyone here that's interested in starting their own business, that you think that they should keep in mind?
I would say understanding that you probably won't be able to pay yourself right out of the gate. We had customers from our previous company, which really helped us at the beginning. It wasn't a lot. It wasn't enough to pay our salaries, but we at least knew we would have a little bit of money coming in every month. And so we really bootstrapped with that first company for the first 5 years of kind of science 1.0. And I also had a semi-full-time job at an art museum as we were founding our company. And the best decision I ever made was leaving that company to work full-time on science. It was super, super risky. I had rent to pay. I had to buy groceries. I fortunately don't have a family that needs to be fed. It's very hard I understand it's very hard for parents with children to start a company. And so understanding that you do have mouths to feed, that you do have a home that you have to pay for, finding other resources to kind of cover those gaps. Maybe your spouse has a job that, you know, they're willing to support the family with, or maybe you have friends and family who are willing to invest early on. That isn't an option for everyone, but something to consider is kind of getting that head start, and letting the other people in your company know that they also will have to take that risk at the beginning, but it could lead to significant rewards. And that's where equity comes in, and that's a whole nother topic.
I would echo kind of what Lisa said. I think the important thing is planning, you know, and thinking about coming up with a plan around what that looks like. And I would say be realistic. You know, I think it's sometimes a really scary thing to do. Honestly, the hardest thing for us was quitting our jobs. And it was my co-founder and I, we worked together. We were peers and we reported to the same person. And we resigned together. It was we literally like debated this day and how it was going to play out in 25 different ways. And it was extremely hard, but thinking about what it means and what the options are, and how, you know, our incomes were very important to us, and you know, we had a plan around it, but we were also realistic, so we weren't expecting to be up and running and paying ourselves quickly, and so we had saved and we had plans and we had contingency plans, and ultimately we ended up doing some consulting work for the organization that we worked with, and that helped us for, you know, my goodness, like maybe like 8 months or so we stayed on, and we were able to do both. At the same time, what I do advise people is that you have to figure out when is the right time to also kind of cut yourself loose, and have enough where you've tested and you know what you want the business to be, and where you can actually dedicate time to scaling and growing it, because otherwise it remains kind of a pet project indefinitely. And then, you know, the income generating side will always win. So at some point you have to have kind of like that heart to heart with yourself and say, you know, this is when I'm going to make the big leap, and it's terrifying, but I've got, you know, a plan around that and how I'm going to mitigate for it. And if it doesn't work out, then how I'm going to go back or figure something else out.
Yeah, I love that idea of planning. And it's super, super important. And I don't think a lot of people think about it. They think, oh, it's going to be so glamorous, and well, we have this great idea, but you would have to think about how quickly will you get to a point where you can start paying people, and what is it going to take from you? What kinds of risks are you going to have to take, and other people in your team as well, early on, to be able to get to that goal. Another thing I didn't mention too is the option of joining an accelerator program that does offer some form of equity arrangement. It can be hard to give up a part of your company, but for us, it has always worked in our favor because of the connections and the ability to grow that came with it.
That's really important to know. I really like the idea of planning too. It's not something that I really ever thought of. Like when I think of someone that's starting their own business, like you pointed out something that's so important, is to have plans and to have those contingency plans, because I do know so many businesses, and you know, to your points, you can't pay yourself right away. It might be a while before you can pay yourself. So having those savings and having those plans is definitely very important.
Well, and I would say just real quick, a plan is a plan until there's a new plan. It's kind of like, so, you know, you also have to know that plan will probably not always pan out the way that you thought it would, you know? So being able to build in flexibility into it and adjusting and pivoting, I think is so important. And honestly, it'll set you up for success as an entrepreneur too, because, you know, you pivot right and left, you know, all the time. So I think that that's also really important. It's like, it's good to have a plan, but it's also important to be flexible with that plan, because it will not pan out the way you wanted it to.
Always anticipate that a pandemic could be around the corner, and it could totally change your business.
Yeah.
That was fun, but here we are.
But hey, your business is still doing well and thriving.
Yeah. Figured it out.
Now, Luisa, I know you started to touch on this a little bit, that you've started to hire people. to support you. And so how did you decide when was the right time to start to hire people to support you?
Yeah, so the first hire that we had was our CTO, Ken. He came on with us when we joined the Food Foundry. We did receive a little bit of money up front before that program. And our first thing was we need somebody to cover our support desk because we already had customers and they were calling and texting all day, every day. And so we needed somebody to cover that while we were in programs and working on our business. And, you know, he's doing much more than that now, but at the beginning, we needed somebody to cover that kind of role. And Andy and I worked on, you know, how are we going to make this into a real company? If you find yourself doing some of the tasks on a day-to-day that you can hire somebody else for, like you only have so much time in a day. Like you can't forever spend every minute, you know, talking to customers, even though it's very important. You can't spend every day, like, you know, depositing checks or running to the store or, you know, all these little things. You probably will for a while, but eventually if you do start to bring in a little bit of money, even if you don't have money at the beginning and you find people who are willing to join you in your journey, take that opportunity to bring them into your team. Because if they show passion, that means that they're probably willing to share that risk with you. And that's where you're going to find co-founders, people who are along for the journey. And then as far as additional team members, we realized pretty early on that we were going to need some support for sales. And we didn't have a system in place. We didn't even really know for sure who our customers were. So we hired someone out of the gate. And it didn't work out, and that's okay. Like we learned very early on that some people are not going to be a good fit. And like I said earlier, people need to know that this is a startup. And that was the biggest mistake we made early on, was we hired a couple of people that didn't understand the growth trajectory and what that would mean for their job over time. And they saw it as more of just a job, which is totally reasonable. Some people just want a job. And so those two early hires didn't work out, but the team we have now is incredible. They understand that they're in this with us and they're growing with us. We've already promoted some of those earlier hires up into new positions as we grow our team, and they're helping us to grow our team. They're helping us to grow our customers. They're building the culture of our team. And it's such a crazy feeling when that like family starts to grow, because it's your idea. Like the first time it really hit me was we were in a meeting with a customer and somebody on our team started talking about what we do. And I was like, that's like my company, but they're part of it and they're excited about it. And that was just the best feeling.
That's awesome. Now, Paula, I know you've also mentioned that your team is growing. So same question to you. How did you decide when it was time to start growing the team?
Yeah, and it's just starting now. So we started operating kind of like a consulting model in a way where we can kind of test and validate our idea and our approach and the solution that we have in a more kind of concierge, like white glove with our clients. But in the back of our heads, we knew the whole time that we had to build technology and we have to figure out a way and have employees in order to be able to scale and grow this and turn it into the platform that we want it to be. So, we now have right now kind of a network of, we use contractors, people that we vetted and we trust and have been working with us. And so it's kind of a mix of contractors that give us kind of part-time work. We've also found lots of different kind of partners, organization or individuals and people that can help us from kind of like a marketing perspective, for example, from kind of an outsourced CMO type perspective. And so we've started to kind of build out that team in that manner, but we also need to start actually recruiting employees in the very, very near future. And it's something that my co-founder and I talk about all the time. It's so important to be able to find the right people and the right partners. And I think one of the big learnings for us has been and it's ironic because I'm in the recruiting industry, but it's really hard to find good people.
Yes.
And very, very hard. And there was two things that I think that we learned as we've kind of grown and scaled is number one, oftentimes, especially when you have a vision and a mission and somebody's personal mission aligns with yours, they might be willing to say, I'll help you out. And, and I can do some work for you and it's free. And it sounds great as an entrepreneur because, you're bootstrapping it and trying to figure out, every dollar. But at the same time, that comes at a cost because there isn't any accountability. And you have timelines and you have goals and expectations. So I think it's really important, whether it's an employee or, or a contractor or somebody that's working with you, to make sure that there's that understanding in terms of what the expectations are. And then the other piece to it, and I think kind of Lisa was alluding to this with one of her hires is, just like with anything, it's okay to take a little bit of a leap, but then also kind of fail fast. If it doesn't work out, then you have to make a decision and move on. We've had situations and partnerships that, once we go in, we think that, this is the best scenario and team that's going to help us. And then once we start seeing the deliverables or their approach, we realize that it's probably not going to be the right fit. And I think there's been situations where we've let it probably go, take more time than it needs to. And we've now learned to say, let's make sure that we know when it's time to cut our losses. We have a gut about these things, and then kind of move on. So I think those are two things that are really important and learnings, honestly, for us.
Yeah, I would agree too with the idea of working with contractors early on. Most of our early employees started as contractors because that allowed us to sort of ease them into a role or ease them into the organization, make sure it's a good fit, and then eventually bump them up to a full-time position because we didn't have enough money to pay all these different full-time people. We just wanted to kind of get a feel for who was a good fit and what their role would be. And then, we did kind of a 3-month trial with some of these contractors and then eventually brought them in as employees. And one of the biggest moves that we've made recently was we actually have a fractional head of people. And so he's a contractor, but he comes from a hospitality background. He understands our customers. He understands our culture. So he's been a huge asset to us with our hiring pipeline, which in the next few months, we're hiring quite a bit. And I am definitely going to look into talking with Paula probably after this, because that's one of the issues we're having is finding the right people and having diversity in that team, because certain tech positions, it is a little bit harder to find certain genders and races. And it's it's very important. It's very important to our culture to bring in people who are a good fit, but also create a sense of diversity with our team.
All really, really great points. And I know Luisa, you and Paula, both of you touched a little bit on some of the financial challenges, but have there been any other challenges and maybe other aspects of the business that you had to overcome in starting in your startups?
So many. I don't know where to start. I mean, the pandemic was a whole thing. That was a big deal for us. We were selling into an industry that was struggling and would not respond to calls, would not respond to emails. It was very, very hard. We officially launched during the Food Foundry demo day in May of 2020. It took about a month for us to sign our first customer, and they were a small customer, and they are still with us today. And we actually have had almost no churn, which is amazing. But along the way, we have identified who is a good customer and who is not a good customer. At the beginning of the pandemic, we wanted to help every restaurant because every restaurant was struggling. Anyone who needed tech problems, we would solve any problem. That's not the case anymore. We've identified which types of technology problems do not fall into our scope, which problems are an extra fee, how we can still be profitable and offer the level of support that we want. because we do still want to take care of our first customers. They're important to us, but we found that they're not our ideal customer type. And we've learned that while taking on, many different types of restaurants of different sizes, different regions, different menus, different point of sale systems. So we've kind of narrowed in on like who our ideal customer is. And that took a long time. It took a lot of trial and error. Pricing has been an issue for us too, because some of these earlier customers needed us a lot more than others, and they were paying less, and it was like, we're not going to make money if we keep doing that. And so, being fair, but also being smart about your business.
I would say that for us, similarly, obviously, it's starting a business in the middle of a pandemic and with everything going on, just added even more complexity to it. We were also in an industry that got hit extremely hard. So it was really interesting because towards the beginning of the year of 2020, we were pitching, we were talking to all these companies that, were interested in recruiting and thinking differently. And then we had like a beta client kind of lined up to be able to, to be kind of our first client and, help us kind of build a plane and fly it at the same time. And then, everything shut down and they said, we're sorry, but, recruiting is completely frozen. We're not doing anything in the foreseeable future and we don't know what's going to happen. So we appreciate you guys, but, let's touch base at a future date. And it was really hard for us because we were kind of excited and had all the wheels kind of running for that. Interestingly, shortly after that, everything started happening with all the social unrest and Black Lives Matter, and the big focus on D&I started becoming front and center. And even though organizations at that point weren't starting to recruit necessarily, they weren't quite ready. The mindset was shifting, and we started to get a lot of attention and emails about it. So organizations that we had early on reached out to and engaged with to kind of float the idea of Wave and plant seeds, all of a sudden we're coming back and saying, are you guys up and running? What are you doing? How are you thinking about this? So it gave us an opportunity to turn a challenge into an opportunity, and to make the best of it, quite frankly. And we've been in that mode ever since. And now that recruiting has really picked up, we feel very fortunate and happy in terms of kind of where we are and the fact that we didn't give up.
It's
all about timing.
Yeah, it's interesting.
It's so great that both of you have, really pointed out how you have to pivot and how you have to pivot quickly. So, Paula, I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about, and you mentioned it, like recruiting can still be very old school. Yeah. So how has innovation and technology like really played a part in your company, and how does this play a part in the industry itself too?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of crazy, especially from a recruiting perspective in an HR. There is so much change, but at the same time, so little. It's very hard to explain that. There's lots of companies in the AI space. There's more and more demand for data and insight. Companies are getting more and better, HR systems and ATS, kind of applicant tracking systems. And then the marketplace is really evolving every day. So there's a lot of change that's happening. But as I mentioned earlier, at the core, the way that people are kind of found, and then the way that people are identified for jobs and then selected for jobs hasn't changed that dramatically. There's companies that are playing in very specific parts of that life cycle. And if you think of the life cycle from, the identifying, so we find somebody from a talent pool all the way to we place them, there's so many different players in each one of those. So what we're trying to do is really focus on where we think there's a critical problem and a critical gap, especially from a kind of diversity perspective. and I think, as I mentioned kind of earlier, the way that companies are recruiting individuals today, whether it's through their traditional kind of networks and referral programs, which yields a lot of the same, or using LinkedIn or other kind of job boards, sometimes that can be very limiting. And the other component to it is they're then evaluating people based on their resumes or that LinkedIn profile. So the approach that we've taken is this very kind of two-pronged approach, we're starting to build out kind of a broader, and we're calling it a diversity network of networks. So how can we partner with different associations, special interest groups, and individuals? I'm Hispanic, but I've never been part of an association necessarily. So how can we actually aggregate and partner with all these different groups and create win-win situations so that their members can also be then part of WAVE as a community? And then how do we actually bring light and highlight and profile those people in a very different way than what their resume reads or the way that their LinkedIn profile looks? Because, sometimes, these individuals, it's particularly damaging to women and minorities who maybe don't have all those check the box experiences. And this becomes particularly problematic at the manager kind of level. So we're really trying to drive that change and drive that shift in mindset and celebrate, those experiences and those backgrounds and bring them forward in order to really kind of change the way that the recruiting is done.
That's awesome. Luisa, I saw on your website about this Farm to Fork Accelerator. So I was wondering if you could tell us more about any VC funding process rounds that you've gone through, and specifically talk maybe a little bit more about the Farm to Fork Accelerator.
Yeah, so Farm to Fork is a Techstars program based out of St. Paul, Minnesota, and that's where I am currently, in a very small apartment with very little furniture. We're in our final week here. It's actually in person, which has been really, really amazing. I mean, getting to connect with the program team and the other founders, we go out and, chat. I'm pretty sure every time we've gone out, we just talk about our businesses, the whole time. And so I've learned a lot from those other founders. This is our second accelerator program. Once we did the Food Foundry program, we felt like we were actually on the path to being a scalable startup, but there was still a lot missing because we were so early stage. During Food Foundry, there were some things that we did miss out on as far as fundraising strategy and go-to-market strategy, productization. And so when we came into Techstars, those were our three areas of focus: was how do we go to market, how do we productize what we do, and how do we fundraise? And so we obviously received a little bit of funding from Techstars to kind of get us through the program, to move up to St. Paul, to grow our team. I think we added maybe 3 or 4 people leading up to being in Techstars. It was we probably should have done that a little bit sooner than we did, because our team was so new that it was hard for them to really do a lot that we needed them to do when we were gone. But now that we're nearing the end, our team is super strong. They've carried us through the program. There's a lot of workshops, a lot of meetings. There's Mentor Madness, where you meet over 80 mentors in 3 weeks. It's craziness, but that has been extremely helpful to us. Just the fact that we've been able to tell so many people what we're doing, and we've had such an amazing network of people supporting us. And that doesn't go away. Once you're in Techstars, you're part of this community forever. And I feel the same about 1871 and Food Foundry. Those communities are so important to us. They're not going away. I would encourage, at least looking into how you can maybe get involved with one of those programs at 1871, just to build that network and learn how other companies have fundraised, how they've raised money in the past, because we had never done it. And so our first round was based mostly on friends and family, and it was all on the same note that we received from the Food Foundry. And now we're going into our seed round, which is just a whole nother ball game. We received a little bit of VC funding prior to that from Long Jump VC in Chicago, which is a founder-led fund. And that's an entire network that we were excited to tap into. It's a group of diverse founders. They have a huge network of LPs in Chicago and beyond. And yeah, we do lose a little bit of equity in that exchange, but we have access to this amazing team that is now part of this Science on Call family. And so that felt like a great fit to us. And I think anyone who's considering raising should really look at who these investors are and if they're a good culture fit for you, because it's like, I'm sure everyone's probably heard this already, but it's like a marriage. Like they're going to be with you for the entire duration of your company. So it's an important conversation to have, an important relationship to build.
You both have such inspiring stories. I love it.
I love talking about my story, and like I'm so excited for the future. I'm so excited to hear about other founders' stories too. So anybody out there who wants to just like chat over virtual coffee or in-person coffee, I'll be back in Chicago next week. So I'm always happy to meet with anyone.
That's great. So because this is Latinas in Tech, we did want to spend a little bit of time talking about your experiences as specifically as Latinas starting your own business. Do you feel like it's impacted you in any sort of way? If you could both actually touch on that.
I would say there's never been a better time. Honestly, it feels like all the stars are aligning in lots of ways. And I would encourage anybody, this isn't an easy kind of journey. But if you have the energy and the passion and the drive, there's never been a better time to be a Latina and to be in, starting your own business, and specifically to be in technology. And I think that there's a lot out there that is being kind of built and created to be able to support us in lots of ways. So it's it's about trying to find those resources, find those individuals, and make it happen. Don't give up, and figure out ways to to get the pieces and the connections and the network that you need in order to kind of attain your goals. So for me, it's been a very positive experience. I think there's always negative experiences, but if you let those kind of taint you, then it becomes, kind of toxic in a way. So it's better to just focus and align yourself with the people that, believe in what we're doing and push forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Those people are out there. You need to find them. They will be crucial to the growth of your business. And like I mentioned before, the Long Jump investment was a huge step for us, because we saw their group of founders as contributing something that we didn't have as part of our company, and having access to their networks. I actually got to meet most of them in person a couple of weeks ago in Chicago, and just that energy of like being founders and being part of this same community was so like eye-opening. I actually attended an event a few weeks ago, just like a Latinx community, startup community program. And just looking around, I was like, oh, I know them. And like, I just like realized like how tight knit this community is. And it feels so amazing. Like Paula said, it is a really great time for Latinx founders and women founders. It is going to be hard. And the most important thing is just be yourself. If you find yourself in a conversation with investors that think you need to act a certain way or be a certain way, those are not good founders for you, or not good investors for you. You need to, find your people, and you will find them. They're out there. It's just sometimes it takes a bit of digging.
And I know we've talked somewhat about challenges, but if maybe we could pivot real quick, what would you say has been, if you had to choose one thing, what has been the most rewarding thing about starting your own business?
Mine is growing our team. Every day that we don't get to have a lot of in-person time together. Hopefully that'll change at some point, but seeing everybody's faces on the screen and where we were 18 months ago is like, it just warms me so much. And seeing everybody on our team communicate like we use kind of a Slack channel to communicate, and seeing how everyone engages each other is just so incredible. And the fact that this was born from us as co-founders is so crazy to me. But looking back, you know, I'm so thrilled to be where I am.
Yeah, I would say the same, you know, as you start seeing kind of that group of people that are working with you and how it's coming together, it's extremely rewarding. The other one that I would highlight is just seeing a vision and an idea come to life is so rewarding. You know, it's kind of funny when we started down the path of Wave, we had my co-founder and I had like a shared, you know, like iPhoto, like, you know, we have a shared photo album, and we would take pictures of different things that were inspiration. And, you know, we would take pictures of like sketches or things that, you know, that were important to us. And when we look back at those now, it's amazing to see, you know, every day you kind of like move forward, but when you go all the way back, you really see what you've built and what you've done. And it's really exciting, and that it's a product and that there's people that are using it and the feedback that you're getting on it. And while it's still not perfect, that there's a place for it. And so that's something that is really, you know, it's empowering and it's exciting, and it's what keeps us kind of going despite the ups and downs, you know.
That's great. Both of you have had such great experiences to share with us. And with that, that concludes our questions, my questions that I had for you. So I do want to turn it over to any audience Q&A that we have, and invite my co-director, Yvonne, over to run the Q&A section.
Well, first of all, thank you, Paula and Luisa, for sharing your incredible stories, and a huge shout out to our moderator, Andrea. If you have any questions, please go to the Q&A box, little chat right there in the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions for Paula and Luisa, I'll give you a couple minutes. We already do have one question, and it's for you, Paula. How can these same equity efforts in recruiting be extended for Latinas that want to find a business? What exactly is different about how minority women need to be represented?
Well, I think, you know, it's part of this, you know, this issue kind of, it's not just applicable within corporate jobs, it's also in terms of like entrepreneurship and, you know, and people that are trying to found their own businesses. You know, I think that we need to, again, kind of push each other and help each other more so in terms of how do we validate that each other's businesses, and how do we help each other with the connections, like Luisa was saying, and the networks that sometimes we don't even know exist out there. And, you know, in the entrepreneurship and, you know, when you're founding your own business, so much of it does have to do with those connections and with the knowledge. So really being able to reach out and finding them, I think is really critical.
90% of life is just showing up. just get out there, go to events.
Mm-hmm.
Go, I mean, you're halfway there. You're on this panel. You're obviously looking to connect with other founders or the network that is available to you, and just keep doing more of that.
Yeah. And the only other thing that I would add to that is, don't be afraid to talk about yourself and why you're the right person to do the job. And even though that job is your company, you know, there's a reason you're there, and you are an expert in whatever that field is, or you know that problem better than anybody else, whether it's for personal reasons or professional reasons. So don't be afraid to highlight why that's something that is so important and why you're the person to solve that problem.
I love that, Paula. And I think that kind of touches on a little bit of one thing we talk about in a lot of these events is imposter syndrome. I think no matter what you do in your career, right, whether, you know, you're working for a big tech company, a startup, or starting your own business, you deal with that self-doubt and fears. But you're right, you are the expert at what you're doing. It's a learning process, and it's something you own. You should own that, right? Be yourself. I think, Luisa, you touched about being your authentic self. You know, that's so important, and I feel like that always stands out when you're you, right? I have one question here. For you both, who are your personal business role models and why?
Mine is probably my dad. He pushed us very hard as children and pushed me especially going through school. I, got good grades. I always kind of knew what I wanted to do. And I think a lot of that just came from the way that he grew up. He grew up on a farm in Mexico. He moved here when he was 18 to go to school and start a family. And he worked very hard and still does. He works for fun. Like he will find any side job he can just because that's all he ever wants to do. And he loves to learn and he loves to continue growing, his toolkit. And so I always look up to him as somebody that I want to be like in the future. Obviously, free time is important. Relaxing is important. I get that from my mom. And so that's always a good balance to have.
I would say my family's obviously been very important. They've always supported me in everything that I do, and they're, and good or bad, they always do support me, which is great. But one of the other people that has been instrumental in everything that I've done, I've had an amazing mentor, and somebody that I didn't work for directly, but ended up getting to know her in one of my jobs. And we ended up building an amazing relationship. And, I've now known her for like, 20 years or something like that. And she's somebody that I can go to with any kind of question or frustration or anything like that. And she's always helped me think through things, and always kind of empowered me and helped me kind of get out of my own way in lots of ways. So I would say, try to also find people that can be great mentors who can, give you the good and the bad, and help you through things, because I think we all need that.
Yeah, I would add on too, as far as mentors, finding mentors that will challenge you is very important. Having cheerleaders is great and awesome, and it feels good, but having someone who will say, I don't know about that, like maybe you should do it differently, that is very, very helpful. And also there are so many mentors out there, and at times you might feel like it's mentor overload, mentor whiplash. You have to be selective at times. You can't spend all day every day talking to mentors, like finding the ones that are the most helpful and really narrowing in on that, so you are using their time and your time to the most potential.
Great, thank you, ladies. And Lisa, I love how you touch on, to look for mentors that will challenge you, because I feel like it can be easy to get in your comfort zone, but you need someone to kind of challenge you, and someone that sees that potential to push you. When we have phases, right? We get in our comfort. Sometimes it's easy to get into that zone, but you need someone to be like, hey, it's time that we challenge you for your next, your next path, your next business venture, right? So I love that you note that as well. I have one more question here, and then we'll close it out. And this came from our chat. One of our guests asked, we're a fintech and looking for Latinas to fill advisory and founding team roles in our organization. We are a Latinx Co, and serving the Hispanic community is our core mission. Any guidance on filling these roles?
I would say that the key is, and I'm happy to talk to you, by the way, and see if there's any way that I can give you some pointers or, specific, kind of tips around it. But I think that one of the big pieces is make sure that whatever approach that you're taking, that it's one that is inclusive, and go to, don't go down the standard path of trying to recruit somebody, don't just post it on LinkedIn or wherever that may be. Take lots, it's going to take more energy and it's going to take more time. Finding the right talent, and especially finding the right diverse talent, takes more energy and time. So just know that up front, but it will pay off. So think about different ways of doing that. And if there's anything that I can help out with, please feel free to reach out directly.
Yeah, and I would say also just looking within your network of, if you're attending events like this, reaching out and sending more personalized emails. We've tried, we have a weekly newsletter that we send out, and we always ask like, hey, we're hiring, you know, if you know anyone. I think sending a more personalized one-on-one email or LinkedIn message like, hey, do you know anybody that might be a good fit for this? That has been helpful to us as we're looking for talent. But obviously you want to make sure that they're a good culture fit, and that you have some sort of interview process in place so that you know, it doesn't bite you later down the road when it ends up not being a fit.
Thank you both so much. I want to thank Paula and Lisa again for your time today, and 1871 for this partnership. And again, a huge shout out to Andrea for leading this conversation. And on that note, where you left Lisa about reaching out, another great place to reach out, I'm going to give Latinas in Tech a shout out, is please do not be afraid to connect with us on our Facebook page. I love our Slack page, and I love how people send messages in some of those group channels we have and are willing to connect, share more information. And please connect with Paula and Lisa on LinkedIn. You'll find their profiles in our chat. And I want to thank you all for joining us today and taking some time to chat with these wonderful speakers.
And I'll add one real quick thing, Yvonne, if this is helpful for anybody. One of the things that we're doing as we finish building out our kind of software and our technology in order to kind of create this new kind of profile, kind of resume 2.0 on an individual. If any of you are interested and willing to, you know, take our approach and our assessment and go through it, you know, you get an awesome output. We are, you know, looking for, you know, betas, individuals who are willing to kind of beta the product, and, you know, we'd love your feedback. So shoot me an email, send me, you know, a LinkedIn request. Would love to connect.
Great. I will be reaching out.
I'll be reaching out as well, but just to support and beta it.
Love it.
Thank you both again.
Yep.
As Yvonne said, we really appreciate it.
This is great. Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye-bye.